Carl, Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell says that he is keeping an open mind about the second impeachment trial of Donald Trump. A big difference, sharp difference from his clear opposition from the very start of the first impeachment trial just a year ago. What do you think, Carl, are the chances that 17 Senate Republicans, and that's what it would take if all of the Democrats vote for conviction, 17 Senate Republicans would vote to convict Donald Trump and remove him? Well, he'll be removed from office, but to keep him from running again.
Well, normally we'd say not much chance, but I think Leader McConnell's statement is a sign that every Republican senator needs to take this seriously. And I think it's all going to boil down to what's the president's defense. Rudy Giuliani charted a very bad course for the president in the morning papers when he suggested that the argument was going to be, well, there couldn't have been incitement because all the charges of widespread voter fraud are true. Well, those charges and the so-called experts that the campaign has mustered to advocate them have been rejected by over 50 courts, with judges appointed by President Trump, President Obama, President Bush, President Clinton, and I think even one Reagan justice. So if it's the Rudy Giuliani defense, there is a strong likelihood that more than 17 Republicans will, because essentially that argument is this was justified. The attack on the Capitol and the attempt to end the congressional hearing on certifying the election was justified because all these charges are true. And frankly, they aren't. They have been given every opportunity to prove them in a court of law and have failed to do so. So I think it really boils down to what's the defense that the president is going to make. And if it's Rudy Giuliani's defense, I think it raises the likelihood of more than 17 Republicans voting for conviction.
When Karl Rove thinks you've gone too far off the deep end, you might want to rein it back a bit. And yet that's exactly the case with Rudy Giuliani amid reports that he may be representing Trump yet again in the upcoming impeachment trial in the Senate. Meaning that Trump looked at Giuliani's 0 wins defending him in post-election litigation and the fact that the New York State Bar Association is considering removing Giuliani from its membership and was like, yeah, I want that guy. And yet that shouldn't come as a surprise, considering lawyers haven't exactly been lining up at Trump's door to defend him. Even those who defended him at the previous impeachment trial, including Jay Sekulow and White House counsel Pat Cipollone, have reportedly refused to represent Trump now. Other lawyers who represented him on other occasions, including former Attorney General from Florida Pam Bondi, Eric Hirschman, Pat Philbin, and Mark Kasowitz, have also reportedly refused. And even legal firms whose reputations suffered immensely after litigating Trump's efforts to overturn the results of a free and fair election seemed wholly unwilling to jump on this grenade, which should serve as a testament to just how poor of a case Trump has heading into this final chapter of his presidency. And yet Giuliani has broadcast that his defense of Trump won't be to argue that Trump didn't incite the insurrection, but rather that he couldn't have incited anything because the claims on which the insurrection was based were true. That's the defense. Still, that the election was stolen. In case you were wondering whether the performative BS would ever stop with this White House, this is your answer. Now, this should go without saying, but I'll say it anyway because there are apparently people who still drink this Kool-Aid. But no, the election was by no means stolen. Trump and his allies brought 65 cases forward and they lost all but one, which shortened a cure deadline from 9 to 6 days in Pennsylvania. Otherwise, they never proved a single instance of fraud, even when arguing before judges who Trump himself appointed. Bill Barr in the DOJ said there was no fraud. Chris Krebs in the DHS's cybersecurity unit said there was no fraud. Republican governors and secretaries of state said there was no fraud. Voting systems vendors said there was no fraud. Recounts and audits confirmed there was no fraud. And here's the best one. Even Giuliani admitted in court that there was no fraud. Think about that. The guy who is set to defend Trump at the trial by claiming fraudulent, stolen elections quite literally had the opportunity to present that very case in court, and he himself told the judge that he wasn't alleging fraud, because even Giuliani knows that he's full of it, and yet he's happy to gaslight everyone else. And bear in mind too, another reason why Giuliani might be arguing that the insurrection was justified is because he himself is implicated in the violence. Here's what Giuliani said just moments before the mob went on to storm the Capitol.
Over the next 10 days, we get to see the machines that are crooked, the ballots that are fraudulent, and if we're wrong, we will be made fools of. But if we're right, a lot of them will go to jail. So, let's have trial by combat. I'm willing to stake I'm willing to stake my reputation. The president is willing to stake his reputation on the fact that we're going to find criminality there. Is Joe Biden willing to stake his reputation that there's no crime there?
And so, of course, the guy is trying to claim that the insurrectionists were justified and to pivot away from the idea of inciting violence because, in effect, he's arguing on his own behalf too. But he thinks that if he can somehow give credence to the big lie, which, again, has been thoroughly debunked, that he can then absolve himself too for pushing for a, quote, trial by combat. He won't, of course, but this is just one more example of how the entire Trump team is comprised of narcissists who are ultimately only looking out for themselves. The fact of the matter is that this is an open and shut case, and the reason for that is simple. Donald Trump fabricated a lie about a stolen election and used it to incite an insurrection. Period. For months, he convinced his supporters that the election was stolen even before the election happened. According to reporting in Axios, Trump started choreographing election night in earnest during the second week of October, weeks before the election even happened. Trump's former chief of staff, Reince Priebus, told a friend that Trump called him around that time and acted out his script, including walking up to a podium and prematurely declaring victory on election night if it looked like he was ahead. From there, he continued on a daily basis to peddle his big lie. He claimed that dead people voted, that the machines were rigged, that votes were being switched, that ballots were being found in suitcases, that precincts had more votes cast than registered voters. Any and every conspiracy theory he could cook up, he would spread. And that culminated to a rally on January 6th that was quite literally called the Stop the Steal rally, meaning that there is zero doubt as to what inspired these people to show up in Washington, D.C. and ultimately storm the Capitol. They were acting directly on Trump's orders. The fact is that this upcoming trial should go beyond partisan politics. This has nothing to do with being a Democrat or a Republican. And in fact, partisan politics really doesn't matter considering Trump lost the election. Republicans don't stand to lose anything politically by convicting Trump, and Democrats don't stand to gain anything politically by convicting Trump. But what a conviction will prove is that our elected officials in the Senate value the Constitution and the rule of law and protecting our democracy. A democracy that Donald Trump attacked by inciting a mob to overtake the U.S. Capitol for the first time in over 200 years. A mob that was intent on killing both Democrats and Republican leaders. A mob that killed a police officer and left 4 of their own to die too. And until and unless our senators in both parties decide that they're willing to grow a spine and take a stand against overt violence, it will continue. And when it happens the next time, it won't just be Trump who's to blame, it'll be every elected official who had the opportunity to put an end to it and instead did nothing. While you're here, please check out my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. I take a deep dive into the top stories of the week, and I also interview major players in the world of politics, like Kamala Harris, Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, Pete Buttigieg, Katie Porter, Al Franken, Cory Booker, Jamie Harrison, Mary Trump, and many more. Again, that's No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, available anywhere you listen to podcasts.